This is the Be Quiet Light-Based 900FX. It's the top model in a whole new series aimed at enthusiasts who like to show off their hardware. It's a full tower dual chamber design with fully windowed front and side panels. There's enough room for the biggest, baddest hardware, and it's got a few tricks up its sleeve that might make you want it, even if you're kinda on the fence about this style of case. It weighs about 16 kilograms or 35 pounds, and as soon as you start handling it and playing around, you can really get a sense for how heavy it is. It really is a solid premium feeling build. But there is possibly one small exception that I'm going to talk about in just a minute. The all-glass front panel means you can't mount fans or radiators there like you could in a normal case. And if you're wondering, you actually can remove this front panel. There's a couple of screws here and here. You take those off, you can slide that piece right out if you want to. Now, even though you can't mount fans at the front, you do gain some extra room on the side next to the motherboard. There's 3 pre-installed 140mm light wings fans over there, and they're reverse bladed so that when they're in an intake configuration, the fancy or good looking side of the fan is facing forwards to make the build look extra nice and clean. After all, it's covered in glass and you're gonna see everything, so I think that makes sense. And you can also fit radiators in that spot up to 360mm. The I/O panel's over here on the front. There's a reset switch, audio jack, USB 3.2 Type A, power button, another USB 3.2 Type A, USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type C, and an ARGB controller button. Around back, we have the PSU and I/O shield cutouts. Of course, the PSU area is going to be vertical because of the dual chamber design. We have a pre-installed 140mm light wings fan, and you can also swap that out for a 120mm fan or 120 to 140mm radiators. And then we have the PCIe expansion slots, and what's cool about these is they can be removed and rotated and then reattached to accommodate vertical GPU setups. It's a pretty easy process to switch it up. There's just 5 screws holding it all in place. You take them out, rotate everything, and then tighten it all back up. The top panel is removable with a single thumb screw at the back. It just pops right off of there, and it's seriously heavy because it's made of all metal. And it does have a nice dust filter on there. If you end up installing a radiator up here like I have and it's exhausting air, then you're probably going to want to remove that dust filter so you don't restrict any airflow. The mounting tray is fully removable and it can fit 320mm or 140mm fans or radiators up to 420mm, which is massive. The bottom has a removable panel and dust filter. It's the same as the top section, and that's because the case can be inverted just by removing these little feet and then reattaching them to the top. They just twist and then pull off. It's really easy to do. But this is the one possible exception to the premium build quality that I mentioned in the beginning of the video. They do feel strong. My concern is just that they're completely plastic. And the way they attach in there is there's these little plastic tabs that fit in and twist inside the metal grate on the top or on the bottom. And I can't help but think that plastic up against metal, twisting like that over time is gonna start to wear out and become loose. I'm just thinking maybe metal would have been a better choice in that sort of spot, but I guess time will tell. While we're on the topic of feet, I should also mention that you can take those feet and attach them to this side over here behind the motherboard tray, and then rotate the whole case onto its back and use it in a horizontal layout. It's a pretty unique and highly versatile design. The side panel behind the motherboard tray is also pretty heavy duty, no surprise there. Again, it's all metal, and the whole thing's ventilated, and it's got a giant dust filter on the back, so we have good airflow and good filtration on here. From this side, we can get another look at these 140mm light wings fans. And this little panel here can open, and then there's room for 2 2.5-inch SSDs right there. Over here we have room for 2 of these removable drive cages, but only one comes with the case, so you're gonna have to buy another one separately if you wanna fit 2 3.5-inch drives in here. Or you can also use those cages to fit 2 2.5-inch SSDs each. So if you do that, that's effectively gonna bring the total space for 2.5-inch drives in this case all the way up to 6. There's a whole bunch of nice thick rubber grommets and regular cutouts to pass cables through to the main area, and they're lined up pretty well with where your motherboard connections end up on the other side. There's some tie-down points where you can use some zip ties or Velcro straps to help secure everything, and we have 2 fan controller hubs, one at the top and one at the bottom. Each one can support up to 6 fans and 6 ARGB connectors for a total of 12 ARGB fans, which is both awesome and crazy all at the same time. Keep in mind you do have to connect those to your power supply and your motherboard to get them working. The power supply mounts up here on its side, and there's still some room above it to tuck away some extra cables that you might want to hide. You can mount PSUs up to 225mm in length, which means you can basically put anything you want in here, including massive 1600 watt units. A little bit later in the video, I'll come back and I'll show you what it looks like back here now that all the hardware is installed and all the cables are there, so you can get an idea what it looks like and how much room you have to play around with cables. The main glass panel comes off with 2 regular thumb screws at the back. Since the power supply is mounted behind the motherboard tray, we have lots of open space here at the bottom. There's a removable tray down here that can support the same stuff as the top one. It's either 320 or 140 millimeter fans or radiators all the way up to 420 millimeters. I want to see if I can get my hands on some more of those reverse bladed light wings fans for down there. Put 3 of those 140s down there, intaking air, nice cool air over the graphics card, and then it's going to rise up and then catch the radiator, then come through the top as exhaust, and also light up that whole bottom area there as well. There's support for motherboards all the way from the tiny Mini-ITX all the way up to huge E-ATX boards. In terms of hardware limits, the max CPU cooler height's 190 millimeters and GPUs can fit up to 495 millimeters, which is insane. Although with the latest trend in GPU sizes over the last 2 generations, anything's possible. And over here they included a simple but super helpful feature. It's a GPU support arm. It can be adjusted up or down and can extend outward to keep big heavy GPUs from sagging. I love it. It means I don't have to use an aftermarket support bracket. It's built in, stays with the case, it's the way it should be. The hardware I'm using in this build is the Intel Core i9-13900K CPU and an MSI Z790 Edge motherboard with 92 gigabytes of DDR5 memory from G.Skill. It's being cooled by an MSI Meg Core Liquid 360mm liquid cooler. The GPU is the Asus Strix RTX 3090 and it's all powered by a Be Quiet Dark Power Pro 1200 watt power supply. At the end of the day, you can think what you want about these dual chamber fish tank style cases, but you gotta admit, this one looks amazing. All that nice glass showing off the build and the RGB fans, plus the light strips running continuously around the 3 sides, it's one of the nicest cases you can get as far as I'm concerned. If we press the top button on the I/O panel, we can cycle through all the different lighting effects. With each color, you can select 3 different effects. You have solid, breathing, or trail. And because everything's plugged into those integrated fan hubs, the case and the fans are all synced up. It's simple, it's easy, and it looks good. Looking back over here now that the system's built, you can see I managed to do like a half decent job with cable management. For me, this is actually pretty good, especially because I added in some extra extension cables, which just adds to the clutter. Even though it seems like it has this huge chamber of space back here, it's still a little tight when you get a big power supply and a lot of cables. I'm fine with the way this turned out, but if you wanted to add in a bunch of SSDs and some hard drives, I think you're going to start to feel a little constrained back here. Overall though, it's not a bad setup for cable management. It's pretty easy installing hardware in the main area because there's a whole lot of open space, but I did find one annoying tight spot. Because I'm using a vertical GPU orientation, the thumb screws that hold the PCI Express bracket in are sitting right under the rear exhaust fan and I can't get my hand in there. I ended up having to use a long magnetic screwdriver and try and torque the screw in on an angle, but when it goes in on an angle, you gotta be careful not to strip the thread. So it's a bit of a pain, and you could tell I kind of gave up and only put one in there. Keep in mind, this is only happening because I'm using a vertical GPU and I've got the 140mm fan here. If you were to switch either of those things, you won't run into that problem. I put the system through a custom run of 3D Mark Times by Extreme 4K benchmark and found that it was very quiet. With the system fans at 50% or below, they're barely noticeable, and all I could really hear was the GPU and CPU cooler. At 100% system fan speed, they do become noticeable, but it's still pretty quiet for max settings. This benchmark definitely doesn't push the hardware all the way to its limits, but it does indicate that the components are getting plenty of cool air, managing to stay very cool at any fan speed. This is my new favorite case, hands down. After the time that I've spent with it, it's super easy to recommend. I highly recommend it, in fact. If you're kind of feeling like this 900FX model is either too big or too expensive, there's some other models you can check out, including the 900DX, which is a little bit cheaper, and the 600 series, which is a little bit smaller. Check down below in the description for the full specs, details, and also some purchasing links if you're thinking of picking one of these up. Give the video a thumbs up and get subscribed on your way out, and we'll see you soon.